What's going on, y'all? This is your girl, Brie Undeniably, checking in for another episode of my speaker series, Deep Conversations with Dope Individuals, where we're discussing development, decision making, and a dedication to purpose. Today, as always, I'm here with another super dope individual, a special guest. I am excited to introduce her. However, before I do, a couple things. First and foremost, got to get my shout outs in there. Shout out to Gotham Podcast Studio. If you are watching this on YouTube, listening through wherever you get your podcasts, you're going to see that crystal clear video, hear that audio, see this awesome space that I'm in. It's all thanks to Gotham Podcast Studio. So shout out to them. Secondly, shout out to MC Kicks and Apparel. MC has sponsored me since day one, always supporting, always hooking it up, always giving me the dope merch to rock for them. If you have not checked out MC Kicks, you can go to their website at emceekicks.com, or you can check them out on any social media at emceekicks. And finally, when you're doing your own thing, you got to pump yourself up. So if you have not checked out my website, brieundeniably.com, that's where you can not only get all of my dope individual merch, I Am Possible merch, but you can also check out all the other cool things that I'm doing. So other than podcasting, all of the workshops, coaching, counseling, different things that I've got going on there, speaking engagements. So go check that out. If you want to book me for any reason, you can do that as well, brieundeniably.com. And finally, I did want to give a disclaimer when I know that the conversation will have sensitive topics in it. I want to make sure I prepare listeners for that. So I am giving a disclaimer for this episode. We will be talking about very sensitive topics like childhood trauma, sexual abuse, domestic violence, substance abuse, and suicide ideation. If any of these topics are sensitive to you in any way, I do still encourage you to listen. It is an incredibly empowering and impactful story that our guest has to share. However, I encourage you to listen in a place that feels safe and comfortable for you. Without further ado, I am super excited to introduce our guest, Charlene Madden. Charlene, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you? Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Absolutely wonderful. Great way to start the day.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Well, let me give you the introduction that you deserve. Let listeners know a little bit about who you are, and then we're going to jump into it. So, Charlene Madden has admittedly spent most of her life living in a state of darkness. After experiencing over 9 years of sexualized trauma at the hands of her grandfather, a decade of domestic violence, and 3+ decades of mental illness and suicide ideology, she was just 2 days away from taking her life when she attended a woman's workshop where everything changed. She was able to take off her blinders, begin the healing process, and find her purpose by turning her mess into her message of hope, evolution, and transformation that she now shares with people all over the world. Charlene is a mother of 3 amazing children, a wife, daughter, Reiki practitioner, women's empowerment coach, and proud Toronto Maple Leafs fan. After almost 30 years in the food and beverage industry, Charlene made a shift and works now in a mining office, which allows her more time to follow her passion of creating platforms of healing for other women and men who may have shared similar experiences or who are ready to make a shift in their own lives. Charlene, welcome again to the show.
Thank you.
So I am really looking forward to this conversation just because I know the profound impact it's going to have on listeners. I know, and listeners know, I kind of chat with guests beforehand. I've said this before, and I know it had a profound impact on me in just our 15 or 20-minute conversation prior. So I am ready to get into it and ready to share your story with everyone. So the way that I like to start the conversation in the counseling community, we like to meet our clients where they're at. I like to do the same in my podcast to help listeners understand a little bit about you and where you're at. So if you could help us meet you where you're at.
Yeah, like you said, I'm living right now in beautiful British Columbia. I'm right in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. So my view every morning is absolutely stunning. I kind of told you at the beginning, I live on a bit of a hobby farm, so I always get to start my day surrounded by Lots of critters. I have 3 dogs and 5 goats, so it's a perfect way to start the day.
Amazing.
And I fill my day with both working in an office, but also working with women who are struggling or who are searching to find their place in life, whether they're trying to overcome a bit of past issues. I help them step into the life that they want to live. So, and I love to share my story because as you know, you're saying, it was a workshop that changed my life and that saved me from being 2 days away from taking my life. So I like to share my story and just the hopes of getting my message across to someone who needs to hear it, because I have a strong belief that there's one person out there every time I tell my story that it will touch. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Man, I completely agree that every time a message like this is shared, it is for sure reaching a life that it needs to reach. And so I even, I got chills when you said it. I feel them through my body already, just knowing the story that we are about to talk about. And I mean, usually I'll ask people to, bring us to the beginning or let us know where this all started. For you, I'm just going to it is a story that you're sharing, so I'm going to just leave you the floor to start wherever you'd like to start. And as we move down that journey, I will ask questions as they arise for me.
Awesome. Yeah, it's the beginning does start my story, and it really starts when I was 3.5 years old. My parents didn't have a great marriage, as many people can relate to. My father was a really severe alcoholic, and he tended to be violent when he drank. And unfortunately, his violence was usually directed at my half brothers. They weren't biologically his, so they were his easy target. So again, when I was 3.5, my mom made a really difficult decision to leave the marriage, and she wanted to take all of us, but my dad would not let her take myself and my older sister, who were his. So she made a difficult decision and saved the kids that she could, because if she had stayed, he probably would have killed one of my brothers. So with that being said, my mom moved on, and about 2 weeks after she had left, with my dad being such a severe alcoholic, he realized he was in no shape to raise 2 little girls. Again, I was 3.5, my sister was 7. So he reached out to my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, and my grandmother didn't miss a beat. She said, absolutely, we will take the girls. And she was absolutely the light of my life. She was an amazing woman, super strong, very independent. And she felt that women should get a good education, good job, be independent, make their own money so they didn't have to depend on anybody. And I always say I probably learned that lesson just a little bit too well. But as wonderful as my grandmother was, unfortunately, my grandfather was a pedophile. So very quickly after moving in with my grandparents, both my sister and I started experiencing sexual abuse at his hands. And this went on for over 9 years. And it was almost a weekly event. He was definitely looked for the perfect timing, which he always seemed to have every week, because my grandmother, who always cared for other people, took one day a week to do a little self-care, and she used to go to bingo every Monday night. And I remember as a child laying in the bed, she would put us into bed, and we would be laying there and we would hear her car back out of the driveway and drive down the road, and you would have that sense of anxiety and impending doom, because you would just lay there listening for the footsteps on the stairs. And I remember as a child, there was always one squeaky stair, and that sound just always, squeaky stairs I still struggle with. So
Yeah.
so again, this went on for 9 years, and it only came out when my sister at the age of 16 went to school and basically had a nervous breakdown, because she was afraid that she was going to become impregnated by my grandfather.
Wow.
And she couldn't handle it. And as much as she wanted to leave, she wanted to run away. She knew if she left, I would be the sole target of the abuse. So she stayed and went through the abuse she went through as a way of protecting me.
Oh,
So Yeah.
Charlene, I just first and foremost, I want to thank you for sharing your story. I know that every time we share vulnerable pieces of our story, especially, you can relive it in a way. And so I just appreciate you sharing these pieces with us and with the audience. Thank you for your vulnerability and courage.
Thank you. So at 12 and a half, everything came out, and my grandparents separated, of course. They got divorced. The only family that I had been trying to hold together through my silence, fell apart. And living in a small town, there was no way to escape it because everybody talked about it.
Mm.
And being the early 80s when this occurred, there wasn't a lot of follow-up care, counseling, therapy, anything along that line. And I remember sitting in a social worker's office after it had all come out, and, the social worker asking me to tell my story, which was really the last thing I wanted to do, was talk about it, because I felt shame
Right.
for knowing that I hadn't said anything. I was almost more ashamed of my silence than I was of what had happened. And I just remember her coming around the desk and patting me kind of on the back and the shoulder and just saying, "I just want you to know everything's going to be okay." And I know she meant well, but I'm thinking at 12 and a half at this stage in my life, I had no idea what okay was, because I had never felt okay.
Right.
And I just remember, okay, well, we'll see what okay is going to be like. So again, I go into high school, which is a really difficult transition for most kids. And for me, it was even more difficult because of all these emotions that I didn't know how to cope with.
Right.
I already felt out of step with the world. I felt disconnected. I didn't feel like anybody really truly loved me other than my grandmother. And I carried that feeling and that lack of self-worth with me. And it just kept building and building. And I started really struggling with mental health issues and being suicidal, not wanting to hold the shame of not wanting to feel like I didn't belong.
Mm-hmm.
And I started cutting as a way of having that emotional outlet, because the emotions are so overwhelming that you have to find an outlet for them. So having that physical pain was just a way of easing the emotional pain that I was feeling. And when I couldn't cut as an outlet, I discovered writing, and it was another way of being able to purge those emotions. And I always said I was either pouring ink onto paper or blood. That was one of the two coping mechanisms.
Wow.
And of course, when I'm 15 and a half, going on 16 at this point, and writing such dark topics, and, poems were my outlet. It of course draws the attention of, your teachers. And I remember very quickly getting pulled into the guidance counselor's office, where they had brought in a school psychologist to talk to me. And I spent an afternoon, 4 hours, sitting in this office with the school psychologist, talking about why I was feeling sad and the emotions I was feeling, and answering questionnaires. And after 4 hours of sitting in there, she says, "I want you to know we're diagnosing you as bipolar manic depressive." Now, again, I'm almost 16. I have no clue what that is.
Right.
And I just feel like, okay, so not only am I, a child abuse victim, now I'm crazy on top of it. I just felt like it was almost like an added stigma that had been put upon me. And of course, I couldn't just pick up my cell phone and Google, because that was not a thing back then.
Right.
So, and I'm not going to go to the library and pull out these books on, I don't even know where to go for information. And she said, "But I want you to know you're going to be okay." And again, I start to get really angry, because I'm like, here I have another adult telling me that I'm going to be okay. And how do they make those promises? How do they know that I'm going to be okay? Because I don't know if I'm going to be okay.
And what does okay even mean? Does okay mean that, like, hey, don't worry, you're still here surviving with us, so that's okay in our eyes? Like, what does okay mean?
Exactly. And as I said, when I was younger, I had no idea what okay was supposed to look like, because I had never felt okay.
Right.
So, I left the office with if you're feeling like you need to talk, please book an appointment, come talk to us. And I'm thinking to myself, the last thing I want to do is talk about this. I want to do what my grandmother has taught me to do, and that's just put my head down and bowl my way through life and just get away from where I am. And that's all I could focus on, was if I just got through high school and moved away, everything would be different. I would go somewhere where no one knew who I was. No one knew what my past was. I could just blend in. And so that's what I did. I finished high school. I moved away. I moved away with my high school sweetheart. And very quickly we decided we were going to start a family. We had been together since I was 15 and a half, 16. And we thought we were going to be together forever. And I, of course, wanted to have children because I thought it was my way of, number one, filling the hole that I felt inside. And also, I was going to do a better job. I was going to be a better mom. I was going to be the perfect parent. And of course, I hadn't done any of the work that I needed to do to deal with my own issues. So all parenting did was really just add more pain into my life, because my coping mechanism at the time had turned to alcohol. So I was drinking heavily. I was still battling with my mental health. And I knew I wasn't being the mom that I so desperately wanted to be. I just felt like here I was repeating the generational patterns of dysfunction. And when I was 28, after I'd had my third child, so I had two daughters and a son, my mental illness really got to a point where I was again contemplating suicide. And I remember sitting down with my husband and saying, I need to leave because I'm afraid the kids are going to come home and find me dead, because I was, how can I do it? I could hang myself off the rail, like I was thinking about it, and I didn't want to do that to my kids. And at this point, my marriage was basically over. And my husband was like, okay, yeah, sounds great. There was nothing there. And I left the house, and because I didn't feel like I could care for myself, let alone three little kids. And so all of a sudden that just kicks in the shame of, I have just repeated what my parents did to me. I have just abandoned my kids. So instead of leaving and getting things back together and putting the pieces together, they just shattered apart even worse. I was drinking again so heavily. I was basically drunk every day. And it was at that point, about a month after I separated my husband, that I jumped into another relationship. And I just so desperately wanted someone to love me, to want me, to say I was worth being here. And when they say like attracts like, they are usually really correct, because the person I got into the relationship with was extremely dysfunctional. He had experienced his own childhood trauma. He was an alcoholic. He had just gotten out of a relationship himself. And I didn't know it at the time. He had some drug addiction issues. And he was also extremely violent when he drank. And so very quickly on into the relationship, I started experiencing domestic violence. And it really fit the pattern of what I thought I deserved. I thought, this is karma. You're getting exactly what you deserve for leaving your children, abandoning it. And so I just went through with the way my life was. I just accepted it as, this is how it's going to be for me. And about 2 years into it, after an extremely bad episode, he had left the apartment, and I was sitting on the living room floor, and I was just like, this is no way to live. I can't do this anymore. And I went to my bathroom cabinet and I emptied out all the pills, and I took them all. And then I sat down on my couch with a pad of paper and a pen, and I started writing my goodbye letters to my kids. And as tough as a thing that was to do, trying to explain to my children why I'm abandoning them in the most final way, it was also the best thing I did, because I realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't go through with it. So I jumped into a cab. I went to the emergency room, and I was sitting at the admissions desk saying, hey, I think I'm overdosing. I took a bunch of pills and I collapsed. And when I woke up, I'm in a bed with tubes down my throat, and my partner sitting beside me in a chair, crying, telling me how sorry he is. And I so desperately wanted to believe it. I get discharged from the hospital, and my mom calls me, and she's like, look, I think you need a change. I think you need to move across the country, bring the kids. We'll help you get on your feet. You can make a fresh start. this fit right into my pattern of running from my problems, because I thought if I just moved to a different place, everything would be better.
Mm-hmm.
Not realizing that the problem was coming with me because I was the problem. And I moved across the country. And 6 months later, my partner decided he was going to move out as well, with the promises once again that, he loved me, everything was different, everything was going to change, and it didn't. And this went on for another decade, 10 years of abuse and alcoholism on both of our parts, and adultery on his part, and drug addiction. And it was in 2015, he came home on Canada Day, which is July 1st up here, and told me he was going to leave. He was moving out that day and moving in right away with someone else. And again, I felt totally abandoned, but I thought, okay, Charlene, this is it. This is your opportunity to pull it all together. And I was on my way to doing that. I was about 2.5 months in after he had left. I had some great support from friends. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to get my life together. And he placed a call to me a Tuesday evening. Texted me on a Tuesday evening and said, hey, can we get together and talk? And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm just starting to be okay. If I see you, I'm going right back to square one.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, I just wanted to apologize for how things ended. And the last thing I said was, it's okay. Things end the way they're supposed to end. 2 days later, I'm sitting at work and a police officer comes in and asks to see me outside. This is a police officer that had dealt with a domestic violence issue between us, so he knew where to find me. And he took me outside and he said, Charlene, I just want you to know I came on shift and there was a notice on the board. Your ex-partner has committed suicide. He had driven up into the mountains and shot and killed himself.
Wow.
And I was absolutely crushed.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like my world completely caved in on me. I was going to have to go tell my children that their stepdad, as dysfunctional as he had been, after 13.5 years, had taken his life. And I didn't know how I was going to put my pieces back together, let alone theirs. And this kind of threw me into a tailspin. I tried to throw myself into work, which is what I always did, and try to convince myself that I was going to be okay. But as each day ticked on, I felt like the darkness just was creeping in closer and closer and closer. And I received a letter from his place of work. He had left me as his beneficiary in his life insurance policy. So I received this money, and I thought, well, I would give all this money away if I could get one more day, right? Is what we always think. And I kind of had some guilt about that I was carrying as well. And I thought, I need to get my life together. I need to go get some help. I was starting to be suicidal again. And at this time, I only had my son living with me still at home. And I started to go see a psychiatrist. And I thought, okay, this is it. We're going to get fixed. Because that's what I was thinking. Someone was going to fix me. And about 3 appointments in, I'm getting really frustrated because she wants me to keep talking about my past. And I don't want to keep talking about my past, right? Like, I know why I'm messed up. This is what I keep thinking. I'm like, I get it. I know exactly why I'm screwed up. I don't need I don't need to go through it all. I just need to tell me how to fix it. Give me the steps, because I'm a list girl. Do these things and I'll be better. And I remember before the end of the appointment, I said, can you just tell me what you did to deal with your mental health struggles? And I remember her looking at me and her eyes kind of glazed over. And she was like, well, Charlene, I've never dealt with mental health struggles. And I was like, what? Like, then how can you sit there and tell me you understand how I feel? Because that's what you keep telling me. Oh, I understand. No, you don't understand. You have no clue how this feels to live like this. And I kind of left that appointment and I checked out. Yeah. I was like, I can't even get help when I try to get help. That's it. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I don't want to fight anymore. I don't have it in me. And I made a decision that day that I was going to end my life. I had purchased the house. I was taking possession at the end of September. So I set a date about 4 weeks later that I was going to end my life. I was going to go to the same location my ex-partner had gone to, and I was going to shoot myself as well. So about 2 weeks before that date that I had set, a coworker comes up to me and says, "Hey, there's this woman's workshop I'd really like to go to. It's in 2 weeks. It's a Saturday and Sunday. Do you want to go?" And I was like, yeah, no. Like that was the last thing I was thinking about. Like, no, I don't want to go sit in a room with a bunch of people and pretend that I'm okay. And she looked at me and she goes, "Please, I really want to go, but I don't want to go alone." And I was like, oh, that's my kryptonite, right? Like, I always care about other people more than I care about myself. And at the point, I was thinking, this girl really needs to go because she's really struggling in life right now. Like, I'm completely projecting myself, I think, onto her, but I'm
Wow.
like, this girl needs to go. She needs to go get some confidence and feel good about herself. And I was like, okay, I'll go. And I'm thinking, this is actually perfect. I can go for the 2 days. It's the Saturday and the Sunday. And the date that I've set to end my life is the Monday. So I can go pretend I'm okay for 2 more days. It's a perfect, facade that I can carry on. And so I showed up that Saturday morning and I pulled in the parking lot and I had my hunting rifle in the back seat of my car as I was all prepared to, for the Monday morning. And I walked into the room of that workshop and I immediately felt sick to my stomach because I am looking at all of these women who are well dressed, who are talking excitedly, and they, in my eyes, have it all together. And here I am, just barely holding my pieces together. And I felt like this is just a spotlight of how I don't belong in this world. I am so out of place in this room, and I am just pretending once again. I went and I sat down in my seat, just tried to pretend that, I was not even in the room. But in the first half of the Saturday went on, I'm listening to speakers talk about financial wellness and diet and exercise. And in my mind, I'm like, this is so irrelevant for me right now because none of this matters to me. And then after lunch, we come back and the afternoon session starts, and a woman gets on stage and she is bald and she has alopecia. And she starts talking about her struggles as a child dealing with lack of self esteem, no self love, no self worth, because, as women, our hair is our crown, right? This determines our beauty, and how she had struggled her entire life until the moment came when she learned that if she could just love herself and stop relying on society to say that she was worth, being loved and worth being here, that everything would be different. And she loved herself and her whole life changed. And as I'm sitting in my chair, I hear this little voice in the back of my head that says, "What about you?" And I think, yeah, what about you? Like, how different would your life have been had you learned to love yourself? How you didn't need everybody else to give you your value. You understood your value from within. How different could things have been? And of course, I brush it off because my mind's already made up. Next speaker takes the stage, and it's a woman who starts talking about living with mental health issues and depression for the last 2 decades, and how she had fought her depression. And it was when she finally embraced it as being a part of her, and knowing that she had to love all of her, which meant she had to love that part of her as well. And that if she loved it and embraced the dark, she could pull it in and let the light in. And again, I'm sitting there in that seat going, what about you? I hear that little voice. And I'm like, yeah, how different could my life have been had I learned to live with my mental illness? How if I had learned not to struggle, how different things could have been.
And Charlene, I just want to push in right here because I'm hearing you sort of give us what that voice was, and it sounds like you were speaking to yourself as if you were already gone.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
As if
Yeah,
that,
because
yeah.
in my mind I was.
Yes.
right? Like I
My
was already
goodness.
gone. It was just the details of time.
Yeah, like it was almost like when I'm hearing you say this, I almost like see, this what could have been, aura of you kind of speaking
Mm-hmm.
to you, as if you have already, yeah, as if you're already gone. And it's just, it's
Mm-hmm.
chilling to think about it that way. But I mean, it's very, very, very powerful. Please continue. I'm sorry to
Mm-hmm.
interrupt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the last speaker takes the stage for the day, and it is a gentleman. And he gets up there and he starts talking about um, his failed marriage, living with alcoholism, losing custody of his kids, and sinking into a depression where he became suicidal. And he had started on the journey of trying to find a perfect mix of alcohol and pain medication so that he could commit suicide, but make it look like an accidental overdose.
Mm.
Because he sold life insurance, he knew the ins and outs of how it had to look. And one evening, his wife contacted and said, "Hey, I'd like to go out. Could you watch the kids for an evening?" And this never happened for him. And he said, "Yes, of course, I'll take the kids overnight." So he has his kids overnight. And it is that night that he finds that perfect mix of drugs and alcohol. And he is laying on his couch with his kids sleeping in the room next to him. And he can feel himself slowly overdosing. And he knows that this is it. And as he's laying on that couch, he hears this voice that says, "No, not like this, not today, there's more." And he manages to get to his cell phone, he calls 911. He gets to the hospital, of course, he's saved. And this is the catalyst that gets him the help that he needs. He gets into therapy, he gets clean and sober. And he realizes, not only how close he was, but also how close other people are in the world. And he decides that he is going to share his story in hopes that someone else will hear his message and be saved. Now, I'm sitting there in my seat and I am like going, I'm like looking around because I'm like, what is going on right now? Like, I'm also looking for a hidden camera, I'm like, I'm at an event that I did not want to go to. I have just heard three speakers who have touched on the three areas of my life that I have struggled with for almost all my life.
Mm-hmm.
What are the chances that I am sitting here just by accident? I'm like, this is not an accident that I am here. I am here to hear this message because I am meant to be alive. I am not meant to, in 2 days from now, go up into the mountains and shoot and kill myself. I am meant to live, and I am not just meant to live. I'm not just meant to survive. I'm meant to thrive. And I'm meant to take my story of all of the pain and trauma and heartache that I've experienced, and I am meant to share that and paying it forward in hopes of reaching someone who can relate to my experiences. And I made a decision in that chair. And like I say, it was a light switch moment. I made a decision to live. And I remember going up to the woman who hosted the event and saying, "I would love to talk to you about this event and what it has meant to me," because I had this sense of urgency to thank her and to let her know that this event had saved my life. And I got the opportunity to sit down with her. And I remember saying, "I would love to come back next year to your event if you host it and speak and share my story." And she was like, "Absolutely." So I went back the next year. And so much in that year of my life had changed. And, I say when I walked out of that workshop, it was almost like I heard a collective sigh from the universe that was like, "Okay, all right, we've been waiting for you. Let's go. We got big plans for you." And I went back the next year and I spoke at that event. And I remember before I got off the stage saying, my purpose in sharing my story is just to reach one person. Because if I can save just one life, then everything I have gone through is worth it. Mm-hmm. And I got off that stage and I was getting ready to walk out of the room. And a woman approached me that had been in the audience. and said, you know how you said you wanted to save a life? I just want you to know today you did. And she turned and walked away. And I am like standing there kind of in shock and awe. And then I hear that little voice in the back of my head that I've learned to become really good friends with. And it says, okay, let's go find one more. So for me, every day is honoring that. Let's just go find one more. Let's just share so that we can pull someone out of the darkness. So that's why I do these opportunities. I love to share my story in hopes that I can reach that one more.
Charlene, I mean, if anyone is watching, you'll see that I'm trying to not trying to well up these tears right now because your story. This is the second time you've told it to me, and it brings me to that point every time. You are saving people. That's what you do. You save people. You were save number zero. You were the ground zero
Mm-hmm.
to save, and then you've been saving ever since. And I don't even have words right now. I'm just going to take a moment for follow up, just because you know your whole story. I'm just digesting, and I'm sure listeners are too. Thank you so much for sharing, for saving, for being here, for continuing to follow that voice. You, as I'm sure you know now, have impacted people in ways that has totally shifted their entire experience in this world. And as we spoke about in the beginning, I'm very sure that you are continuing on in your mission and coming on this podcast and sharing your story with others. You are definitely saving at least one life, and I commend you. You're an incredible human being. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so whew, there's so many questions I want to ask. I don't know that any of them right now are going to that we'll be able to really break down. We have about 20 minutes left, so though I want to ask so many questions about your story, I also think that you told your story so beautifully, and I just want to sort of preserve that as it is. What I do want to do is talk about from there because you want to know something that I can say I picked out from your story. You mentioned several times about the pieces of you, sort of collecting pieces of you, holding on to pieces of you, trying to put pieces of you back together. And as I was listening to you tell your story, I thought to myself, the one thing that it doesn't seem like she ever did was, no matter how broken the pieces were, you never let them go. You held them tight. You kept, so it might have just been a puzzle, not put together you just had the pieces there. Might have been in a satchel. It could have been, they could have been scattered around, but you never let go of your pieces. You always stayed true to trying to figure out how you can collect these pieces of you to feel whole, to feel that okay that you had been told about and you didn't understand what it meant. So that was just, something that I wanted to point out. And I can imagine that there's listeners, and I guess what I can say is to sort of fuse that. Keep holding on to your pieces, even if you can't figure out how they yet fit together, or even if you don't think that you'll ever be able to put them back together again. Hold on to them, because there might be that life-changing moment, there might be that life-changing experience that makes them all fit together and makes you whole again. So again, thank you. I just did want to point that out. I thought it was that's what continued to impact me, because I heard you say it and I was like, she still has them, though. They're still there. Those pieces are still there. Okay, so what I do want to sort of transition to is, I know I said the sort of from there. So let's talk about from there. It seems like, well, I know that this was a life-changing moment for you, and you then got to go and share that at the same event, and history repeated itself, and you were able to save another life. Um, this has since become a big part of you, sharing your story.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think to talk about too the transition from that first workshop that saved my life
Mm-hmm.
and to the process moving on, um, because like it really became for me one of the big things I had to do was get really honest, and not just with myself, but with the people around me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I left that event and I contacted a good friend of mine and I said, "Hey, I need you to take all my guns." And then I contacted my employer and I said, "Hey, I need you to take all of my pain medication because I have a
Mm.
chronic pain disorder." So, and, not telling anyone why. And, luckily, and not luckily, but no one asked questions. Like I was really lucky with the support group that I had, that they just unquestioning, sure,
Yeah.
whatever we can do. And it was the leading, making that decision and making those choices of, this is what I need to do. I need to get honest and say, I need to take these situations out of my life right now. And then look at what had been holding me back and going, okay, I have been terrified my entire life. I have lived in a constant state of fear, fear of not being enough, fear of being judged, fear of everyone leaving me and being all alone. And I mean, my first memory really of a child, as a child, is sitting alone out on my grandmother's front porch.
Mm.
And that always kind of echoed with me, that feeling of lone and really of being all that I had. So when you talked about holding those pieces, I think I held those pieces because I felt like I was the only one that I had
Yeah.
that was going to, stay, that I was the only one I could rely on.
Mm-hmm.
And, so stepping out of that and putting my trust in that I could rely on other people and I could start doing things that scared me. And part of that was speaking my truth about, hey, this is what I have been experiencing, because I was such a master of having this persona of having it all together. I mean, other than I was such a heavy drinker, and if that wasn't a red flag to most people, I don't know what would have been. But um having, being able to have open and honest conversations with the people that, hey, I've been struggling, and that was part of owning my truth. And it, I knew I needed to get radically honest with myself. And I also needed to be honest with the people that were around me. So I needed to say, here's what I've been struggling with. Here's what my intention is. This is where I was. Now this is the direction that I'm going. And yeah, I would, love and appreciate the support that you can give me. And when you're going through it, you don't want to be a burden on people. I always was like, everyone has their own issues, they don't need to know about yours. You don't want to be that person. But I recognized, after losing my ex-partner, that people do want to know, because the loss is so great when you're not there. And that was one of my big things, was that, you know I struggled after he took his life, because I had this anger inside of me, because I was mad he did it first. Because with him doing it first, it left me to see all the pieces that were left behind, how broken everyone is.
Mm.
And I didn't want to do that to people, but yet I didn't want to be here.
Right.
So going on that path of starting to do things that scared me. And part of that was sharing my story and taking the opportunities. But the fear is always, because it was difficult in the beginning, because you still are dealing with that fear of judgment. Like, what are people going to think?
Mm-hmm.
But that fear of judgment is so overwhelmed by the passion and the purpose of knowing that there's other people out there. So
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm happy that you just brought in purpose there, because it is a piece that I really like to bring into the podcast. And I'd just love to hear about you and now how you're really fulfilling that purpose, what you're doing, what purpose means to you, how you found it, just whatever your thoughts are on purpose.
Yeah. And I always say that that day sitting at that workshop, that's what saved my life because I found my purpose. I
Mhm.
had always, as a child, I wanted to be a writer my entire life. That's what I wanted to do. I loved stories, and I always wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be going traveling the world and sharing other people's stories. And I think it really stemmed from the fact that as a child, I felt I didn't have a voice. So being able to write stories was my way of passive aggressively sharing everything that I was feeling inside, not, not knowing it as a child, but,
Right.
and then being able to share other people's stories really for me highlighted the good and the bad that was going on in the world, because that's what I saw in my life was the good and the bad, the good of my grandmother, the bad of my grandfather. So I wanted to be able to share other people's stories, but understanding, in that moment, sitting in that seat, that my purpose was just to share my own struggles as a way of helping other people heal. I knew all along, like, I mean, I knew intellectually that people suffered from domestic violence and sexual abuse and mental health issues. I knew that, but hearing it so authentically and raw and honestly is what impacted my life. So for me, it was my purpose is just to, if I have to, sit in the dark with someone until they're ready to rise up, but being that catalyst to help them rise up out of the dark. And I think, I talk about purpose because I think we all have purpose. And I think when you hear the word purpose, people think it has to be something grand, right? Like, you're building schools in Africa or you're feeding the starving in India. Like, your purpose doesn't have to be this massive thing, in the world, but it's massive in your world.
Yes.
So I always say, like, whether you're just being, if your purpose is to be a mom, just be the best mom that you can be.
Mhm.
If your purpose is to work at McDonald's, then do that and fulfill your purpose and do that passionately and love what you're doing. So for me, it's like going, okay, my purpose is to help other people, help other women who are suffering. How do I do that? Okay, I can create platforms, so I created my own workshop where I can bring speakers in. So for me, it's paying that forward and being able to provide healing opportunities for other people.
Mhm. Oh, thank you so much. I love that you really brought in that piece about it does like it not having to be so grand either. It's
Mm-hmm.
what's big in your world, what is meaningful and impactful in your world. How do you take what you know and what you love and create impact with that? So thank you for that. I really appreciate you sharing. Okay, we are in the last few minutes. We have just shy of 10 minutes left. So I like to do a rapid fire round at the end of each episode. And then I do want to leave the floor to you for final thoughts or words that you'd like to leave listeners with, and then let everyone know where they can find you.
Perfect.
All right. So first, we are going to do some rapid fire. In the beginning of the podcast, I said we were going to talk about three things: development, decision making, and a dedication to purpose. I mean, your story through and through definitely spoke on all of those pieces. Right now, I want to know specifically in development at this point in your life, do you feel like you're working more on personal development or professional development?
I think they go hand in hand.
They do. They
Yeah, a hundred
do.
percent. I
Yeah.
mean, I do the work on myself every
Hmm.
single day. And I know that the better that I become, the more people I can help. So to
Hmm.
me, that's completely hand in hand.
I love that answer. Thank you. Okay, the next one is decision making. When you're making decisions, do you base more of your decisions off of choice, meaning you might follow science, numbers, analytics, or guiding voice, meaning you follow gut feeling, spirituality, intuition, something else of the sort?
It's that little voice.
That voice,
Yeah, yeah. I
I
am
could have
not
guessed.
I drive my husband absolutely batty because I am not an analytical person whatsoever. He's the more let's write things down and look at all. I'm like, no, let's just go, let's do it. I trust my gut. It's got me here. So
That's right. That's right. All right. And the last one is purpose. This one I've recently tweaked because just based on answers I've received, I have a new curiosity about it. And I'm wondering, do you believe purpose is nature or nurture? Are we born with it, or do we discover it through our own experiences? Like, do we, or create it through our own experiences?
Hmm. I guess for me, I would say it's nurture. I think
Mm,
in my
yes.
situation, what I went through created my desire
Hmm.
to help other people because I so desperately wanted someone to help me. So everything I went through created the person that I am, and that person is the person that wants to go out there and help the world. So
All right. Thank you. All right, so that's the end of my rapid fire round. Just a couple quick questions. We are wrapping up now, just about 5 minutes left. I want to leave you the floor one more time, Charlene. If there's any final thoughts, words, message that you'd like to share with listeners in the audience, please feel free to do so. And then you can let everyone know where they can find you.
absolutely. I always love to leave with a message that
Hmm.
if you're feeling like you're in a spot where you are in a really dark place and you don't feel like you have anyone else to reach out to, please reach out to me. You know, message me on Facebook, as I always say, the best way to get a hold of me. Um, please message me and I will come and sit virtually in the dark with you as long as you need me to. I will hold space for you. I will listen until you're ready to rise up, and I will help you if you need that. And if you just need someone to listen and not judge, I can be that person. I'm so passionate about people not knowing that they're not, or knowing that they're not alone.
Hmm.
um, we all go through different experiences, but pain was one of those universal things that we can all relate to and experience. So please reach out to me if you feel like you don't have anybody else, and remember there's so many options virtually that you can
Yes.
reach out to. That's the great thing about that COVID has taught me, that so many support groups online. And if you're afraid of using your own name, use my name. Say you're Charlene Madden, whatever you got to do
Yeah.
to, give you the courage to reach out and get the help that you need. Um, please do that. And again, as I was saying, you can reach out to me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Please don't make fun of my goat videos. um, and you can find me on I have two different websites. So Charlene Madden speaker.com or Ascension Wellness, which is where I do my coaching programs through.
Wonderful.
So just reach out if you want to chat, if you've heard this episode and it has impacted you, or you want to share your story, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you. So
Thank you, Charlene. I'm finding it hard to get the words. I am so inspired, impacted by you and your strength and your story and your power and your light and your brilliance. And thank you so, so much. And continue to do exactly what you're doing. Continue to sit in the dark with others. I love uh, holding space in that way. I think that that's such a brilliant way to put that. Continue to save. You are incredible. Thank you again.
well, thank you. And thank you for your platform. Thank you for
Absolutely.
doing the work that you're doing, because you're creating ripples that, you're allowing me to reach that life that needs to hear it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Charlene Madden, everyone. As I end all of my podcasts, until next time, let this be the moment.